three buddies had taken off their military uniform and were climbing in their car. I said, what's going on? I said, we're leaving this place. We ain't working with this Army outfit. We're going to work with the space people. And that was the beginning of the Marshall Space Flight Center. Didn't have a building. And it was 4,000 of us met with the Army and convinced them that we were resigning. And that was a huge loss for the Army at that time. All these young guys had been trained in missiles, but we didn't know anything about rockets. So we went from rocketry and military stuff to the peaceful use of outer space overnight. And never again did any of us touch a missile or a rocket. It was always the space business from then on. And Von Braun was the leader. He left the same time we left. He stayed here for over 10 years in the agency. I stayed here for about 20 years. And then I woke up one morning and they said, you're going outside, Buckbee, to the new Space Center. And I said, what? And that was the beginning of the U.S. Space and Rocket Center. I was there on loan. I had every intention of coming back, but they wouldn't let me come back because the thing was just getting off the ground. So I ended up spending 20 years there. That was my last so-called real job. It was fun though. It was fun. The real rocket. The early Redstone was just an old modified missile.
Right.
And we modified that thing and flew a few astronauts. Alan Shepard was my buddy. He flew that thing a couple times. And then we, all of a sudden, this team began to think about a real rocket. And when the Saturn V came alive, that was a big deal.
Something beyond an ICBM.
Yeah. And we test fired that thing out here, I don't know how many times. The booster that we kept for all those years was ground tested for 40 times on the tower.
Right.
And that was the big deal because there was no other Saturn V anywhere until we shipped it to the Cape. And then so that was a whole nother career. We'd climb on an airplane and fly to the Cape on Monday, get that Saturn ready, come back on Friday night, do it again. It was about 25 people. I was the PR public relations guy for that team. And those were the experts for the Saturn V for many, many years before many of them moved permanently to the Cape. So we lost a lot of people in those years to the Cape because they just couldn't come back every weekend and survive the family. So we lost a lot of guys in those days. But that Saturn V was a main machine. I know we fired it several times, just kind of a short burst, and nobody paid much attention to it. And then we fired a long 2.5 minute test firing, and there was a lot of people that were moving back away from the structure. And all of a sudden, they built a shelter. Because we didn't have a shelter when we first fired that thing. So they finally said, well, put a shelter up. So we started standing behind the shelter with a little split view that you could just feel the wind come in and so forth.
Was that the one where you had JFK stand, like when he checked out?
That's right.
Was that was the Saturn V or?
Saturn, no.
The engine that you showed?
That was Saturn 1.
Okay.
It was the booster. We did not have the big Saturn V ready for the president.
Okay. Got
So
it.
he,
But apparently he was still impressed.
but he was, in fact, he picked Von Braun up and flew him in his airplane to the Cape that very day because VB had not been invited to the Cape. And the president didn't know anything what was going on at the Cape. So Von Braun went with him, and I heard that he was leaving, and he said, I don't have any clothes, I don't have a bag. So I run home to his house and pick up his stuff, put it on another airplane, and ended up down there. And the president he just says, I've got to come back. but he never got, he passed, we lost him before he got to see a real launch. We had the Saturn 1 Block 2 on the pad that day, as I recall.
So
And,
they were doing two tests that same day?
I'm sorry?
They were doing two tests that same day, Huntsville and the Cape?
They were, they had two birds stacked, in fact.
Were you
And
guys
that-
working together, or were you kind of competing for his attention?
Well, it was, I think we were not
That's gonna PR.
not always comfortable giving them, the Cape people, that much information.
Yeah.
It was like, well, the team is not here yet, you know. So we would say, you go ahead and, you know, work on it, clean it up and so forth. And they would stand out there for hours waiting for our team to come. And when our guys showed up, you know, we'd get ready to launch that thing. And it was like that for several launches that were only approved by the Huntsville team. But then eventually the Army, the guys at the Cape beat up on us, and they became the winners, the shooters and the shakers on the Saturn program. But unfortunately, the president never got to see that Saturn V fly. I think we flew that thing, was it 15 times? I think it was 15 times. It never failed. Not even one engine failed. We had a second stage engine go kind of crazy on one launch, but it kept on burning. There was enough power in those other engines to keep that thing alive.